Greetings, students. I feel like the computer science class has kind of ramped up in its difficulty over the past few lessons. So I'm going to take the time just to kind of review over some of the important codes that you're going to need moving forward. So we're going to start by a quick review of lesson 9, which sprite movement. That's where we learned the counter pattern, which is going to be very important. So let's restore this back to the beginning. Alright, so the first thing you have to do is you have to create a sprite. So you always go to animation. There are no animations in here. So this animation tab, if there's nothing in here, then nothing will animate. So you gotta choose a couple things to animate. The crab's kind of cute. I'll choose the crab. And then of course, I always like to download my own images from the internet. Some of you do too. And I always save them in my picture here. So let me choose Pac-Man. So now I have two animations. You can change the name of this. So I can call this just Pac-Man, simple. Could just call that crab. Later you're going to learn how to manipulate it. So I could turn it to Pac-Man right now. His mouth is facing to the right. Now it's facing to the left. Now Pac-Man's facing down. Now Pac-Man's facing up. So some of you have asked, well, how come this gets cut off? I really don't know how to answer that, to be honest. If it does get cut off, I recommend then you just delete that and you re-upload it again. Maybe try to make it smaller. So I don't know if you remember how to make these things smaller, but you would, let me pause for a second. So I don't know if you remember how to make it smaller, but you would go up here where it says resize the drawing area and make sure that both of these are checked. And then I usually just make this a smaller number, like 200. Then I resize. You can do that with the crab too. Resize the drawing area. Maybe turn this into 150. Make sure you click resize right here. And there you have it. So first it says create the sprites. So hopefully by now you guys realize you need 3 lines of code to create sprites. You need to create a variable. So if I'm going to create a crab sprite, I'm going to call that variable crab. Then you need to set animation for it. So I'm going to do crab.setAnimation. And in the drop down arrow, I choose crab. And then finally, you always need to draw sprites. And I always put this code at the bottom inside the draw loop. So if I do that and I run it, there's my crab. He's at 200 by 200. I want to change his position. Of course, this is the X position. This is the Y position. Now if I reset and run, now my crab's moved up there. It's hard to see him there. Let's go 100 by 100. A lot of this is trial and error. You just try something, then you run it and see where it appears. I also want to bring in my Pac-Man. So I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to call it Pac-Man. Notice how I use camel case, so the M is capitalized. Bring this over, Pac-Man, and I'm going to choose the Pac-Man, and instead of doing 200, I'm going to go 300 by 200. Let's see where that appears. All right, now I have my two animations. So this lesson, lesson 9, was all about the counter pattern. So as you're thinking about your code, these comments in gray help you. So it says create sprites and set animation. So I just did that. Then it said draw sprite, so I moved that there. I have to draw a background. Does anybody remember where to go in these tools? This is the toolbox. These are your different tools: math, sprites, variables, drawing, world. Where do I go to draw a background? Drawing, that's right. So I would click background color. I'll just leave it white for now. And then I want to make these guys move. There are a bunch of different things you can do to make them move. All using the counter pattern. We can either move them along the X or left and right. We can move them along the Y or up and down. We can change their size by making them larger or smaller, and we can do a sprite rotation which turns them. So I'll try a little bit of everything to show you how it's done as a good review. So I'm going to go variables. I'll move this over. First thing I want to do is I want to make sprite X move. Let's say I want to make sprite X move. Let's say I want to make the Pac-Man move to the left. So that would be minus. That's sprite X minus sprite X equals sprite X minus 1. Now, of course, we don't have a variable called sprite, we have crab or Pac-Man, so I have to rename this as Pac. Then I reset and run, and there it is, slowly moving. Mess around with the number, see what happens when you increase the number, and run it again. All right, let's say I also want Pac-Man to be rotating as he moves. So I'm going to use the variable code again. And some of you are getting to the point where you realize you can just type the text in. So if you've got skills, I mean, using the blocks is fine, but eventually you're going to want to start typing. Pacman.rotation equals Pacman.rotation plus 1. And of course, at the end of every line of code, you need a semicolon, so I click semicolon. Now, if I go back to show blocks, I could have also just dragged those blocks over the way I did the first time. So now let's see what happens. So now he's turning left and rotating as he does it. Kind of cool. All right, now we're going to add some more properties for the crab. So these are the Pac-Man properties. Let's say I wanted to add comments about my crab, so I can go like enter, put 2 slashes. I'm going to call this crab properties, and I'm going to put some stuff in there. If I go back, now I have some comments. So let's say I want the crab to move down the screen. Well, if you remember, this is 0, this is 400, so as the crab moves down, it goes Y0, Y1, Y2, so Y is getting bigger. So if it's getting bigger, is that plus or minus? So we already said it's going to be sprite Y. And those of you who are thinking about it, as we're moving down the screen from a Y position of 0 to 400, it is in fact getting larger, so it's a plus. Every time Y gets 1 bigger. So now I'm going to choose sprite Y, and I'm going to say plus 1. And now I'm going to change that to crab, because that is what we defined our variable as up here, variable crab for this sprite. Now I'm going to reset and run. You see them moving. Now I'm also going to show you the sprite scale, making the crab large and small as it moves. So I'll go to show text again, sprite.scale. I can just type crab.scale equals crab.scale. If I do plus 1, let's see what happens. Oh, the crab is getting larger. Let's say I wanted the crab scale to be random between a couple of different numbers. If I wanted to do that, then I would take this part out. I would go to math. I would choose a random number between 0.5 and 2. Now if I reset and run, as it's moving, it's getting larger and smaller. That's a good quick review of lesson 9. I'm going to stop there.